The night it happened, they almost called animal control. They should have called a gas company instead. Bayo was a 3-year-old bull mastiff, 128 pounds, the color of warm sand, with the disposition of an animal that has decided calmness is its profession. He had been in the house since before Lena was born. He met her as a newborn with the restraint of something that understood its own size. Careful, slow, always aware of where he ended and the small person began. Their daughter Lena was 22 months old. Their daughter did not walk yet. She moved at speed in directions that changed without notice, with the total confidence of a child who had never once considered consequences. Tobias worked night shifts at the plant. Marguerite worked from home, a translation contractor, her desk in the front room with a view of the street. It was a Wednesday evening in late November. Marguerite had been at her desk until 9 p.m. The house ran on oil heat. The furnace was 8 years old. She had put Lena down at 7:30. She had checked the monitor at 8:15. Everything was fine. She was finishing a document when she heard Bayo's claws on the hardwood in the hallway. He never came to the front room this late. He slept in the kitchen by the baseboard heater. She looked up from her screen. He was standing in the doorway between the front room and the hallway, which was also the doorway between the hallway and the base of the stairs. He was standing sideways, not looking at her, looking at the front door. She said his name. He didn't move. She stood. She walked toward him. He didn't come to her. He kept his position, his broad body across the width of the doorway, and when she reached him, she realized he was trembling, not violently, a vibration across the muscles of his back and haunches, almost imperceptible. She had never seen him tremble. In 3 years, she had never seen him do anything that required the word tremble. She tried to step around him. He stepped with her, side to side, blocking. That was the moment she felt fear move through her, and it moved from the wrong direction. She was afraid of him, which in 3 years she had never once been. A 128-pound dog vibrating at the entryway between her and the stairs her toddler slept at the top of. She called Tobias. He said maybe he heard something outside. He said maybe a coyote. She said this is different, and he could hear it in her voice and said he'd leave early. If you stay for stories about what animals sense, before we do, you're in the right place. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Bayo held his position for 37 minutes. She timed it because she had nothing else to do with her hands. She sat in the front room and watched him stand in that doorway, with his shoulder pressed against one side of the frame and his broad haunch against the other, and his eyes fixed on the front door. And he trembled the whole time with the small, constant tremor of an animal doing something it has decided it will not stop doing. Tobias arrived at 10:12. He came in through the back door. He walked to where Bayo stood and looked at him for about 10 seconds, and then said, "I smell something." It was faint, below the threshold of certain, the kind of smell you check twice because you're not sure if you're smelling something or imagining it. He went to the basement. The furnace flue had cracked at the collar where it joined the main stack. The crack was less than 3 centimeters wide. The furnace had been running since 5 p.m. Carbon monoxide had been slowly backdrafting into the house for 5 hours. The detector on the main floor had a battery that had died sometime in September. Neither of them had checked it. The detector in the hallway outside Lena's room, 9 feet from where she slept, had the same dead battery. Has your dog ever done something that made no sense until it was the only thing that made sense? Tell us in the comments. These stories deserve to be heard. The fire department responded in 11 minutes. The CO reading at the top of the stairs, outside Lena's room, was 87 parts per million. The EPA threshold for dangerous exposure in infants during sleep is 35 parts per million. At the furnace level, the reading was 210. The lead firefighter, a man named Earl Hutchins, 17 years on the job, told Tobias the crack in the flue collar was the kind that happened slowly, that the furnace would have been leaking at lower levels for probably 2 to 3 weeks, that it would have been building all evening. He said the dog had been in the basement. He said the basement level would have been significantly higher. Dr. Pauline Voss, toxicology, explained it to them. 2 days later, the way someone explains something they expect to have to say more than once. Dogs are exquisitely sensitive to CO, even at concentrations well below the threshold of human perception. The compound binds to hemoglobin the same way it does in humans, but their respiratory rate is higher, their exposure more rapid, their detection, their discomfort, begins earlier. Bayo had been standing in that doorway because the air behind it, the air Marguerite would have walked through, the air that reached the stairs, the air at the top of the stairs where Lena slept, was not safe. He had been standing there with his body the only barrier he had, because that was the only language left to him. Every minute she tried to step around him, he stepped with her. Every guardian deserves to be recognized, even the ones who never asked for anything in return. If stories like this matter to you, subscribe so you never miss the next one. Tobias brought him home from the emergency vet clinic the next morning. Bayo had been treated for CO exposure himself. Marguerite opened the back door, and he walked inside and went to the foot of the stairs and sat down. Just sat, and looked up toward the top of the stairs the way he had been trained by no one to do, the way he had decided on his own in November, the way that had cost him something and done it anyway. Lena came down the stairs at 7:15 the next morning, pulling herself down step by the rail, the way she always did. She reached the bottom and walked over to Bayo and put one hand flat on his broad forehead. Without being prompted, he leaned into it. The next story involves a dog who began circling a baby's crib every night for a week, and what the pediatric neurologist found when they finally listened. Bayo lay down at the foot of the stairs, stretched out nose toward the front door, eyes open in the dark. Still on the job nobody gave him, but he took anyway.